Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most trusted voice in true crime. Today is July 16th and 2 years ago today, we see on the timeline that at 05:33, again very early, Shanann called Watson, held a nearly 5-minute conversation. What do you think that was about? Do you think it was about Vivid? Do you think it was about cleaning the basement, some aspect that hadn't been cleaned before? Do you think it was still talking about Nutgate? Do you think it was talking about how the kids were? We don't know. We don't know what happened in some of those conversations. About 3 hours later, and this is really quite ironic, I think, Watts took 3 photos from an Anadarko corporate office in Platteville, one of which was of a sunflower near what appears to be his work truck. Now just think about this. In a weird way, Shanann is sort of teaching Watts how to, I don't know, do his homework or report back to a woman, right? And with Shanann it is take photos of the kids or take photos of the basement or call Vivint or whatever. With Kessinger, what he's now doing is he's taking photos of flowers, and he's then looks like he sends them to Kessinger, almost as if to say, I'm thinking of you. So in the same way, Shanann's thinking of Watts, but in terms of what he can do, Watts is thinking of Kessinger, but sending these sort of neutral or friendly gestures of, of affection, symbolic of affection. Interestingly, the phone data review notes that this would not be the last time he took photos of flowers. I suspect, and this is what the phone data reviewer writes, I suspect that he took these 4 and shared them with Kessinger. She has an affinity with flora and had a wide assortment of flower pictures in her phone. That's quite interesting that Kessinger had a lot of flowers on her phone. I actually happen to have a lot as well. I'm also interested in nature and in plants and that sort of thing. So obviously Watts is trying to impress Kessinger, and he's probably kind of almost using the wiring that he's got with Shanann, he's using with her. In other words, send me pictures to show that you, in terms of Shanann, not that you're necessarily thinking of me, but that you're doing something that I need you to do. With Kessinger, it's a little bit different. He's sending them to her as a sign of his interest in her, as a sign of his commitment to her, right? We couldn't imagine in a million years him sending photos of flowers to Shanann, certainly not at this point. Although, wouldn't most men, if their wives were pregnant, wouldn't they sort of send some sort of message or sentiment that, I'm thinking of you, I'm thinking of our new little child that's on the way? That's not where Watts' mind is at all. At 12:26, between 12:26 and 12:28, Watts resumed his internet search for Dave Bunk minerals, and so for whatever reason, I think this was a Monday. I think July 16th was a Monday. For whatever reason, Watts is in kind of a romantic mood. Is thinking of flowers and thinking of, looks like jewelry of some kind. Whatever it is, it's in Kessinger's, how can I put it? It's to do with her. It is for her benefit, right? Now, again, what I want to sort of emphasize here is, I've been reviewing another narrative. I've been going through the social media. I've been looking at some of the glowing endorsements Shanann gave from years ago, where she says, she didn't just say it once, she said it many times, that Chris is the best thing that's ever happened to her, that he does so much for her, that he, anyway, and yet he's supposed to be a narcissist. He's supposed to be selfish. It's supposed to be all about him. And here you see, also on July 16th, he's taking photos of flowers. He didn't only write those love letters. there was quite a lot of other things as well. And then also the thing about the Dave Bunk minerals. Now, I know some people would counter argue and say, when you're in love, you're narcissistic by nature. You're thinking of yourself. Anything you give, you're thinking to get something in return. I think that's quite a cynical view. I think that's quite a cynical view. I can tell you that fairly recently I did something for somebody else that I like and that I find attractive. I'm not going to say too much about that, but I, how can I put it? I certainly don't expect anything in return. I kind of wanted to do that. And I would like her to like me, but I think the main reason I did what I did was because I wanted to spend some time with this person. And so I was very much in a giving frame of mind. And I don't know if that's narcissistic. I mean, I think that's to do with something else that is driving you, which is a feeling about somebody else. Does that make sense? So I get the same sense here that what's actually felt a little bit inadequate around Kissinger. I'm not sure if he felt as smart as she was. I think she seemed to have a handle on their finances better even than he did. She seemed to know that they couldn't afford a third child. And that seemed to be a thought that didn't even compute with him. What do you mean afford? Why do we need to afford anything? Just take another credit card. She seemed to change his world and change his reality, but in a way that he seemed to like, seemed to appreciate. The search for Dave Bunk minerals also seems to suggest that Watts is getting quite serious now. It's not just, how can I put it, it's not just a photo of flowers, which is quite easy. It is, he probably wants to buy something like possibly jewelry. So my impression is that on July 16th, this is 2 days after July 14th, obviously, and July 14th she was at his home, and I wonder whether she wasn't sort of expressing almost like a pining sense, a longing sense that I want this. I want the fairy tale too. And you know, am I going to have this fairy tale with you, or are you going to leave your fairy tale and start one with me, or am I going to have to go and find my fairy tale somewhere else? And if you think about the end of the story, it's quite tragic for Kissinger. It was this interest in the fairy tale that got her into a world of trouble and a world of hurt, I think, a world of damage control. So my original post for July 16th was fairy tale but with interruptions. So in other words, Watts is trying to find his way to his fairy tale with Kissinger, maybe the same with Kissinger, but there are interruptions. Where are the interruptions coming from? He does seem smitten on the 16th. Maybe he wants to buy Kissinger a gift. Can he afford it? He's also taken it upon himself to fix Kissinger's Toyota. And what this shows is he's become not only fixated on Kissinger, he's already embarking on a new life and lifestyle with it. He's investing himself in her. He's not fixing the Vivint sensor, he's fixing Kissinger's Toyota. And it might be quite simple. It might be just a scratch on the outside at 1329, between 1329 and 1333, which is possibly around the lunch break time at Anadarko. Watts searched Google on topics like touch-up paint bottles Toyota and Toyota dealership Highway 85 and Toyota dealership Brighton. And of course, Kissinger owned a Toyota, and so it looks like he was going to do something to sort of touch up her paint, or to fix a scratch that was on her car or something like that. This is from page 2087 in the Discovery. It's phone data review page 17. Now if you go into the next page, 2088, it's the last entry there, between 1546 and 1624. Bear in mind this is around the time Watts would come home from work. He would go to work early, return quite late. Go to work early, return early. And Shanann and Watts exchanged several calls, holding nearly 33 minutes in conversation. So my impression is that was another sort of argumentative episode, that this was around about 35 minutes of arguing over 45 minutes between that time frame, between 1546 and 1624. Now, Watts probably, at 1624, he probably wanted to get off the phone and go back to Kessinger, go back to her house. Shanann's there's probably quite a lot to argue about. They can probably argue about three major things. One being Nutgate. Two, Vivint, has the fucking sensor been fixed yet? And three, why are you so weird? Like, I've got a child, I'm carrying your child, and we never talk. What the hell is going on? And this happens through the course of a bunch of conversations, ending up being about 33 minutes. And Watts probably doesn't want to talk most of that time. And Shanann is sort of losing control. She's getting him to do chores. She thinks she's still got him under her thumb, but does she? And if she only knew that he was looking at flowers and looking at jewelry for somebody else, how far gone he actually was. So he was really just trying to keep the peace with Shanann. He was trying to say what she wanted to hear so he could get away with it. Now, I can't overemphasize this. That was Watts's modus operandi. That was Watts's sort of way of dealing with Shanann, which is, this is a dominant personality. This is someone that he fears to some extent. And how does he deal with her? How does he manipulate her? How does he control her? Well, he says something that he thinks she wants to hear that's going to get him off the hook. And isn't that exactly what he did with the police and the FBI and Tammy Lee when she asked about the polygraph test? You're saying what the person wants to hear so that they're satisfied. Of course, it's not the truth, but you're giving them enough that it's going to benefit them, or they think, and it's going to benefit you. Again, you must ask how that fits into narcissism. Wouldn't a narcissist just lie? Why would a narcissist care about what you wanted to hear? Now, you might say, well, maybe it's covert narcissism. But look how it also fits into introversion. Someone who doesn't want to have a confrontation, but he's also too weak to sort of know how to avoid it in certain cases. I mean, you would think a narcissist would either have the ability, the nous, to manipulate somebody else cleverly and well, and Watts didn't have that ability, or you would have the selfishness and self-preservation sort of switch to say, I'm going to get a lawyer, I'm not going to take the polygraph, and in terms of Shanann, I don't know, just find a way to protect himself without doing anything else for someone else. So, for example, why would he do the chore of cleaning the basement if he's a narcissist, if everything he does is for himself on a Sunday? Does it fit in better with narcissism or introversion? What actually is able to start embarking on a new life and lifestyle with Kessinger? How? Because Shanann's given him unprecedented space, 5 whole weeks. 5 whole weeks. She's not even sleeping at home. The kids aren't home. So he's got a heck of a lot of space to use. And the only thing that is impinging on that is a series of intermittent phone calls between Watts and his wife. And all Watts has got to do is get through those calls and get Shanann kind of off his back. If she asks him to do something, yes, he'll do it. If she complains about something, no, it's fine. If she's upset about something, I'm sorry, I'll fix it. Do you know what I mean? He doesn't argue with her to prolong the conversation. He goes along with what she's saying to end the conversation. So, bear in mind, this is still only the first week after Nutgate, and Nutgate remained a serious issue even when Watts finally travelled to see his folks in North Carolina a few weeks later in early August. So Nutgate never went away. By the way, I forgot to put up a link to a video from Shanann's Facebook. It's basically where Shanann is celebrating Celeste's birthday, third birthday I think. And there are a couple of other kids there, and I think the maternal grandparents are there. But of course, Cindy and Ronnie aren't there. And Jamie's not there either. And if you think about it, Shanann's spending 5-6 weeks in North Carolina. Now her child is having a birthday, and guess what? She's all the way in North Carolina, and guess what? Half the family aren't even going to be there. And for the rest of the time there, they're not going to see her. So for at least another 3 weeks, there's certainly no point in being in North Carolina from the in-laws' perspective. One kind of wonders why Shanann didn't return home at this point. You know, she'd had kind of a setback. Why not go home at this point? Why not go back to Colorado at this point? Why stay another 3 weeks? Now, while we have the impression that Watts wanted a new life with Kessinger and that's why he murdered his family, in reality, he was already in the new life to a large extent before the crime. In other words, in those 5 weeks, he was already in a new life. He was spending almost every night at Kessinger. He was seeing her every day. His children were gone. His wife was gone. He was already living this new life. It wasn't that he wanted this new life, he already had it. And he didn't want to lose it. He didn't want to let go of it. He didn't want Shanann to come and sort of drag him kicking and screaming back into his old life. He didn't want his old life. So I think it would be more accurate to say he wanted to keep his new life, and he didn't want to, he wanted to give up his old life. His old life was dead to him in a way already. So the crime was committed to allow him to stay in that life and for the status quo as it was to continue. That's kind of what he wanted to happen. Each time Shanann called him, she painfully interrupted his fairy tale, reminding him that eventually he would have to make a choice between one life and another, one face and another. This is how and where the psychology of premeditation takes root. Maybe not consciously at first, but through many small triggers, desires, thoughts, and wishes. And over time, someone emerges as a preferred choice, and someone else as an increasing threat to that perfect present that fantasized happily ever after. Now we move on to July 7th, 2018, which would be tomorrow, 2 years ago today, in terms of the Chris Watts timeline. The reason I'm dealing with it today is because it's relatively short, and because the 16th and 17th are kind of similar, just in terms of what's going on. So I won't obviously be dealing with the timeline tomorrow, but I will the day after that. And the title on Crime Rocket 2 for this was Just North of Roggen, photos of flowers again for 2 days in a row, and a pair of brand new work boots. Now, I don't know whether he got these work boots from Kessinger, whether she gave them to him as a gift. It would be quite a sensible gift. It would be quite a thoughtful gift as well. It would be something he would need. Another thing to ask is, could he afford that? Where did this come from? So the other thing also to bear in mind is, was he at this point already thinking about committing the crime and where he was going to commit the crime? Was he wearing these new work boots because of this idea that he was going to change his footwear or something like that? I don't think so. I don't think that was going on. But what I do want you to think about is, I mentioned something about a whole host of triggers, desires, thoughts and wishes. A lot of little thought flashes going on. And now think about buying a new pair of work boots. And what does that symbolize? Subconsciously or consciously, what's his replacing an old pair of work boots for a new pair? What's his getting something at work or for work that is much better than he had before? And there's no one to say to him, where did you buy these boots? Who said you could buy these boots? We can't afford these boots, whatever. He buys them and he enjoys them. He buys them and he wears them. He buys them and people compliment him. And he likes that feeling. If he needs something, he can get it. There's a bit of narcissism possibly in that. Although, how many people don't do that? I mean, how many people don't need something and go and get it? Especially to do with work. So about a month before his arrest, bear in mind this was recorded on July 17th. Watts was arrested, I think about July 15th or so, midnight July 15th. Watts is out in the open prairie at the Survey Ranch. So just think about it from, if you could freeze time, if you could go back in time, and here is Watts, and he's looking quite happy. He's got a tan, he's got the sun on his shoulders, he's fit, he's healthy, he's having sex every night, he's in love, his mind is in a happy place with a couple of interruptions. And he's striding out through the open prairie at the Survey Ranch, north of Roggen, and Shanann had called him a few hours earlier. What's going through his mind? He's in this pleasant place, and Shanann keeps interrupting that. Every time she calls, it's kind of a bummer. Every time she calls, his heart sinks. Every time she calls, it's disappointing. It makes him afraid, makes him maybe even angry. And yet he's got to pretend to be nice and kind and do nothing that's going to raise her suspicions. And let's face it, a month later, Shanann still had no idea that he was having an affair. When people said to her, do you think he's having an affair? She was like, no. Why? Because all this time Chris Watts was still being nice to her when he spoke to her. At 05:22, Shanann called Watts and held a 5.5-minute conversation. She's calling him every morning. I don't know if she's waking him up, but she's still at the beginning of his everyday and kind of at the end of his everyday. And every time she calls, do you think he's thinking, I'm looking forward to talking to her? At 12 minutes past 10 to 11:46, mid-morning, Watts took several images of trees and grass and flowers in an open prairie just north of Roggen. And these were images 2589, 2590, 2591, 2593, 2594, 2596, 259 and 3317. If you think of each of those numbers as being an individual photo, and each of those individual photos is Watts taking something for somebody else because he wants to please them, he wants her to think well of him. And obviously what he's doing today, July 17th, he did the day before, and obviously that was a good result. Whatever Kissinger said made him feel good. Maybe she said, oh, it's beautiful, thank you for thinking of me. And so he does it again the next day. This time instead of 3 photos, it looks like it could be 6. He's taken even more photos, he's thinking of her even more. So I think the interruptions from Shanann are getting to be more painful for him, and I think the moments with Kissinger are getting to be more pleasurable, more enjoyable, more fun, more of what he wants to be, who he wants to be, where he wants to be. At 16:37, so towards the end of that workday, Watts took a photograph of his new work boots, identical to those found in the Lexus during that search. Now, one wonders, what were those work boots? What was that photo for? Was it to send to Shanann or to show Kissinger? What do you think? When we look at these cases in hindsight, we tend to project the future into them, the end result that we know is coming. But we don't project the past or the situation the perpetrator is in and knows is coming. In other words, we don't go to July 17th and not know what is going to happen after that. And that's a mistake, because Chris Watts doesn't know at this point what's going to happen. All those dynamics may be aligning a certain way, but it's by no means inevitable. All these forces are still taking shape. And the same applies to Kissinger. Kissinger, at this point in time, doesn't know what's going to happen. She's developed feelings for what, she's not quite sure where they're going to go. In terms of Shanann, she probably thinks everything is still fine. You know, she's gotten pissed off with Watts' parents, but it's nothing particularly unusual. Watts will just have to deal with it. She will make him deal with it, I guess, or she will explain it to him in a way that he's going to have to accept. He's accepted things before, and you know, he listens to what she says, and so she's got every reason to expect that he'll listen again, except he's not, because something new is happening this time, something Shanann would never have expected. And this is what Watts is also bargaining on. Watts is bargaining on Shanann kind of resting on her laurels, Shanann being very confident in what she knows. And he's probably trying to reinforce that confidence by kowtowing to what she says. And does that make sense? I think there was a time when Shanann did ask him if he was having an affair, and I think this was as late as the first week of August. Watts said to her something like, "You know me, you know the kind of person I am." And that was very clever of Watts, very clever of him to use her own psychology against her, to almost her own contempt for him against her, to say, "You know what a weak person I am. You know that I've got no game. You know that I'm useless around women. So use that and make up your mind whether I am having an affair." And so that's exactly what she did, and it worked. Shanann wasn't looking at the evidence. She wasn't looking at his behavior. She wasn't looking at him. She was looking at, I know this guy. He just, there's no way it would happen. Well, there was a way. It was happening. That reality was separate from the reality that she believed. And that does happen. When Watts was at Survey Ranch that day in July taking photos, or the day before, or on both days, did he think this would be a good place to get rid of bodies? Did someone make a comment that made him think about it? Because he didn't think that thought for the first time on Sunday night or Monday morning, August 12 or 13. I really don't think it was the first time he'd ever thought of the Survey Ranch as a place to get rid of bodies. I think the thought had occurred to him earlier. Not necessarily here, but between here and then. We know for a fact that on Friday he was actively seeking out Survey 319, access to it alone. And I don't think that was the first time he'd thought of Survey 319 either. Why that particular well? On one of his visits to the well on his own, he must have thought, I'm sick of being interrupted, and maybe I can use this access that I've got. the question does arise: when did the thought, the murderous impulse, occur to him for the first time? So you can go to look at the video of Cece's birthday on the post July 17th, 2018. You can go and have a look at that. I think it was actually posted July 15th though. Also, when Watts bought his work boots, did he think of making further changes to his wardrobe, his home, his circumstances? He bought those boots. Did he think, well, I wonder if I shouldn't buy that as well? I must say, I've had that lately. I've bought a couple of things, and that's led me to buy other things. I've done quite a lot of, I've upgraded my one office into a YouTube studio. At the same time, I've had my furniture in the lounge upholstered. I've also bought placemats and a couple of plates. But the point is, the one purchase leads to another and another and another. And then you start thinking, I wonder if I shouldn't change this. In other words, you're kind of in a spirit of change. And when you're changing physical objects around you, doesn't the temptation or the thought or the impulse emerge where you think of changing the people around you? Now, you might, a normal person might change the people around them by calling up a friend or inviting somebody over. Chris Watts, who's an introvert, is maybe thinking of it in a different way. I also want to change the furniture around me. I want to change the people around me. Look at Nutgate. What if one of the children had died of an allergy? Would that have been so bad? Is there a way that I can give Cece an allergy that she can't recover from, and people think it's an allergic reaction? Did those thoughts occur to him? And I think Nutgate, where Shanann is constantly telling him, your mother tried to murder our daughter. I don't think Chris was listening to that the way Shanann was expressing it. Like, in other words, it's bad that Cindy tried to murder Cece. I think Chris Watts is listening to it like, murder Cece, murder, family murder. And it's almost, because of every time he hears from her, he's irritated, he's threatened, he's fearful, he's annoyed. That impulse, I think, starts growing. And in the same way that Kissinger may be a fantasy, maybe there's a flip fantasy, which is the fantasy of murdering his family. Maybe he fantasizes about, instead of a divorce, which would be hard and expensive, what about a fantasy where they just disappear? Because it seems like all three people in the story were like in a dream world. Shanann was in her own dream world with MLM, talking about things being wonderful all the time. Watts was in a dream world. Kissinger was also in a dream world. While we're out in the country north of Roggen, let's dip into a little intertextuality. It's been reported recently, and this was recently at the time, I think it was in 2019, so this was last year this time, that a man in Crete murdered an American woman because he was frustrated with his own life, right? She wasn't related to him. It was just a man in Crete murdered a tourist. He was frustrated with his own life, and there was a lot of sexual frustration that was part of that frustration. That case also started off as a disappearance. Suzanne Eaton's colleagues initially believed that she'd either fallen while jogging or suffered from heat exhaustion and was resting somewhere. But the intertextual part is where her killer dumped the poor woman's body. And this is from CNN. Quote, last Monday, her body was discovered by two locals deep inside a cave, according to Crete's chief of police. The 59-year-old Eaton was found around 60 meters, nearly 200 feet inside the cave, beneath an air shaft that had been covered by a large wooden pallet. The underground caverns had been turned into a bunker by Nazi soldiers during the Second World War. The article goes on to say wheel tracks led officers to the suspect, and he cleaned his vehicle in a graveyard after the attack on Eton. During the preliminary questioning, the 27-year-old denied having been near the bunker, which raised suspicions. Signals from the suspect's phone also placed him near the crime scene on the day of the attack. Police say the suspect is a married father of two who owns farmland near the crime scene. And that I highlighted in red and in bold. Who owns farmland near the crime scene. So this was a married father who kind of randomly attacked a tourist. I think he raped her and murdered her, and then disposed of her remains. And he had the confidence to do this because he owned farmland in the area. And so when he did this, he thought, I can get away with this because I know this area so well, and other people don't. The local police also used aerial support to search for her, but in the end, tire tracks, local knowledge, and cell phone data proved more useful. Where bodies are hidden in the outdoors, look for locals with local knowledge, and often, but not always, vehicles used to transport the body. How else are you going to get the body there? Other high-profile reference cases where bodies were disposed of outdoors: West Memphis 3, Madeleine McCann, Casey Anthony, and Scott Peterson. In how many of these cases were vehicles used? And in how many of these cases was something used as a cover for the bodies or a grave? Either a cave or the sea, or sort of a wooded area, but it's something that is like a cave. And so for Chris Watts, Roggen was his cave. It was his escape from domestic issues. When he was at work, he never got calls from Shanann. It was just before he left and when he returned. And so Roggen was a place of almost like his fortress of solitude. It was his holy ground where Shanann didn't disturb him. And so that was where he wanted to leave her remains and the remains of the children. Something else that I want to leave you with, just a thought I want to leave you with, is I initially made the mistake thinking that Shanann tricked Watts into having the child, the third child. I'm talking about very, very early on. And I based this on Watts's very hesitant response when Shanann told him she was pregnant, that where he sort of comes around the corner. He didn't seem very happy. For someone whose idea it was, he didn't seem particularly happy. Also, the fact that he murdered his unborn child and his wife and his children didn't seem like somebody who wanted another child. So I was certainly under the impression Shanann had snookered him into it or whatever, and it turned out that wasn't the case. It was Watts' idea to have the third child, and then it seems like he changed his mind. And he changed his mind quite quickly. And the 5-week period, and who would expect this? For someone to be pregnant and then leave her husband for 5 weeks with the children, and then the husband's alone for 5 weeks, and then he meets someone else. And then he panics, and I don't want to go back, and he panics, and he realizes how much he likes this other person, how much he doesn't like the situation he was in, and then takes matters to extremes, to put it lightly. But the part that I think we don't talk about, and I know why, but I think we should maybe just step gingerly into this area. The part that we don't talk about is, why would Shanann not want a third child? Because she didn't. I'm talking about when the idea came up to have a third child, was Watts' idea. And why do you think Shanann may have been more resistant to that idea than Watts in the beginning? Well, I think the answer isn't from Shanann's own words on Facebook, where she says, raising Cece was like raising 4 kids. Cece was basically a signal to Shanann how much work it was raising a child, and in this case, her second child. And so now she's going to have a third child. Just something to think about, that Cece kind of made Shanann have second thoughts about having a third child. And I think Watts talks about something about Shanann was 80% this or whatever to Coda, which kind of sounds weird when you go through it. But he's trying to use that against Shanann when it was actually his idea, and not only was it his idea, he then changed his mind. So it's all on him. Thank you for listening. For those interested, there are over 200 individual posts on Chris Watts on Patreon. I upload multiple posts a day, around about 3 or so posts a day on Patreon. You can become a patron for $1 a day, and there are complete audiobooks for not $1 a day, $1 a month. There are complete audiobooks for $5 a month. You can listen to as many as you like, so there's more than one. You don't have to just listen to one a month. You can listen to 4 a month. It depends how quickly you listen to them. And then there are also longer audiobooks on the $10 tier, so go and check it out. There's also a really nice community there, a lot of intelligent people from around the world having intelligent conversations as well. So until the next episode, which will not be tomorrow but on the 18th, in the hashtag 2 years ago CW series, I'll see you guys next time.